Well, I think this is just extraordinary, right? I mean, we think about what's happened in the restaurant industry in the last year. I read things that say that 2/3 of the restaurants in America are going to be out of business, by December 31st, right? And meanwhile, you guys are printing money. I mean, this food trucks are a growth industry, and the COVID pandemic has only really kicked it in the pants, right? So, I mean, Amy, how have you guys and Jordan too? How has your business model had to change as a consequence of COVID? Like, how'd you guys flex to this?
Well, I will tell you, middle of March, when commercial lights went out, I really did start to panic. I'm like, this is my
Yeah,
entire
everybody.
business. There is not one person at work right now. Yes, everybody, not just myself.
Yeah.
Everybody was really trying to pivot and figure out their businesses. But I was thinking to myself, okay, I have to move to residential, multifamily, single family homes. That's where I need to provide opportunities for our partners. And so I very quickly realized there is an enormous opportunity in high rises. And that, working with the Bizzutos and the Graystars and the Brookfields and some of them may or may not be familiar, JBG, if any of you live in, high rises, you're familiar with those names. And yep, there we go. Nick, which one do you live in? Is it in DC?
We just moved into a single family home, but for the first 7 months of the pandemic, there were food trucks outside of our Midtown high-rise condo in Alexandria.
There's your connection.
Yeah,
right there.
of course.
Yeah.
So we discovered that there was a couple things happening in the multifamily properties. Number one, programming is so difficult, so difficult. I mean, typically the property managers are looking to create really nice amenities for the people that live in their building, and they were so limited. The gyms are closed, the amenity spaces are closed. How do they figure out a way to create a sense of belonging and community when everything is shut down and you cannot congregate together? What's left? And the people that are living in the buildings are sick of cooking, and they're sick of the delivery fees, and they need something fresh, and they have children. Many of the families are homeschooling kids, and it just gets boring and monotonous. I mean, no differently than any of us feel every night. So the food trucks have become like, wow, this is amazing. They're almost like these little unicorns that pull up that people are just so excited about. So when I realized, look, there is a really nice opportunity here, I went after it. I'm like, I am going to aggregate as many multifamily properties on our platform as I possibly can to then provide opportunities to our food truck partners. And so it's really been a game changer. When commercial lights, whenever that may be, there's no magic date, come back on. I think that in some ways it's been a blessing in disguise for me, because now I will have not only our residential portfolio, but when the commercial people come back, we'll have both. And I think that the way I look at it, we're giving more opportunity to our food truck owners at that point. So that's how we pivoted. And I think just one more quick point. I think when the commercial, when people do come back to work, I know with my husband, he's like, nobody's allowed in the buildings right now except for the people that work there. So people aren't going to want to go back and forth and go out for lunch, and delivery people are not allowed into the buildings. You have to come downstairs and get your food.
You got to go to them.
Yeah, and I think people are going to be real excited to see people like Adonis pull up.
Well, Adonis, how has the view from inside the truck changed, since the beginning of the year? It must be dramatic.
It has been, because not just we're safety conscious, but the consumer is as well. And when you look at the food truck model itself, you're in your mind, you're like, okay, some of the hype around a food truck, Jason, is standing in line, right, and going and seeing what's trendy and what's good. And so now, you have to really, as a consumer, you have to really shift your paradigm to say, I need to be 6 feet apart. And so what happens, and it's ironic enough that Amy and those guys, they launched their mobile app like literally just in time for us as food truck owners. Because now, as she was mentioning her platform, it gives us a clearer view, Jason, that now it's better because they bridge the gap of my problem. The problem is, before
I can't read the menu. I'm too far away from it.
Or more importantly, I can't read it, but I can't order, right?
Yeah.
But now I have to stand in line behind 100 people. But now with the platform that Amy and those guys have built, it's easy for me, Jason, because all I have to do is look at the thing and say, okay, Amy's picking up her food at 8:15, and this is what it is, and it's already ready for her. Amy comes down, gets her food, everybody's happy. People are not congregating in front of the window. People are not concerned about people not wearing masks. We don't have any of those issues. So for us, it was rough initially, but as people adapted to the way we have to do business from a safety perspective, it kind of changed. And then comes, like I said, Amy and their platform, which makes it that much more easier for us.
And Adonis, I think you bring up a really good point. I think culture has just changed overall, and I think everybody can, has their own feelings about this, but people just expect when they go to a restaurant now to order from QR codes. The places that I've been to, you sit outside, you scan codes. I mean, no one hands you a menu anymore. People are ordering from their phones. I don't know how, and if that will ever go away, even if there is a vaccine. I think people are going to be kind of getting used to this and maybe even liking it. So it's benefits to it.
So when you think about that, you think about how now the industry itself has created a different demand. And I'll use an example. In the last 6 years, the most growth on Facebook and social media were people 50 years and older. Prior to that, right, they didn't want anything to do with it, but they adapted to the way that they needed to communicate and see their family, right? So now what you're saying is now people are now understanding that they have to embrace technology that they were resisting just to get something to eat or to go somewhere, right? Mm-hmm. So now for us being in the position that we're in, we've already been doing what we need to do, but now the consumer has shifted their paradigm to adapt to technology, and we don't have to convince them that this is the best path and a more efficient way to get stuff done. So for me, it's brutal. They did a lot of work. COVID forced a lot of people to adapt to a different lifestyle that I didn't have to convince them to do.
And improvise and overcome. Amen.